The way I feel, I could not let the 4th of July go without acknowledging how Donald Trump has made America great again. The following statements, most of them, come from nymag.com. He took calls from foreign leaders on unsecured phone lines without consulting the State Department. Assembled a team of racists to lead his White House. Gave a voice to every racist, bigot, homophobe, xenophobe, sexist, misogynist, and all other hate groups, and their crimes of hate and violence continue to rise. He invited the manager of his blind trust to a meeting with the Prime Minister of Japan and onto a phone call with the President of Argentina. He derided protesters as paid professionals whose acts of freedom of speech are fundamentally unfair. Persons of color protesters continue to be treated with malice over their white counterparts. He admitted that his charity was guilty of self-dealing. He settled a fraud case for $25 million. He criticized the cast of a Broadway musical for asking the vice president to work on behalf of all Americans. Arts and culture organizations are being threatened of losing all funding. He tried to coerce Britain into appointing a right-wing extremist as its ambassador to the United States. He met with Indian business partners who have publicly declared their intention to capitalize on his status as the president. He appointed Ben Carson Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, despite the fact that Carson has no relevant experience and recently declared himself unqualified for any cabinet position. He handed the Labor Department to a serial violator of labor laws. He attacked a local labor leader for calling attention to his lies. He handed the Environmental Protection Agency to a climate denialist. People in Flint, Michigan still do not have clean water. He defended the propriety of mass murder as an anti-drug policy. He provoked heightened diplomatic tensions with 2 nuclear-armed states. He named his bankruptcy lawyer, who thinks liberal Jews are worse than Nazi collaborators, as his pick for ambassador to Israel. He picked a man who once tried to call for the abolition of the Energy Department, but couldn't remember the department's name, as Secretary of Energy. Environment protectors such as those against the Dakota Pipeline are threatened, abused, and treated like animals. Said he doesn't know why he should be bound by the One China policy. He named a billionaire investor with an enormous personal financial interest in deregulating certain sectors of the economy as his special advisor on regulatory reform. He continued to use Twitter as a tool for souring diplomatic relations with the world's second greatest power. He declared his openness to reviving a nuclear arms race. Disparaged the sitting American president while praising a hostile foreign autocrat. He called NATO obsolete. Named his son-in-law a senior White House advisor in defiance of norms and very likely laws against nepotism. Allowed his Secretary of State nominee to pledge that America would block China's access to the dispute islands in the South China Sea, a promise that, if kept, would almost certainly mean war. He defamed a hero of civil rights movement in a series of racist tweets. Police officers who murder innocent people continue to get away with their crimes. He signed a bevy of executive orders that were drafted by the White House Breitbart wing and no one else. Ordered the Department of Homeland Security to issue a weekly list of crimes allegedly committed by undocumented immigrants in sanctuary cities. Prepared to radically reduce American funding to the United Nations, allowed his press secretary to falsely claim that Iran had committed an act of war against the United States. He created a diplomatic crisis with Australia and threatened to invade Mexico, violated court orders against his travel ban, used the executive branch immense authority over border control to inflict arbitrary cruelty on thousands of Muslim immigrants, created chaos in airports all across America, and soured diplomatic relations with the rest of the world. Insisted that his Supreme Court pick had no problem with attacks on the judiciary in the face of blatant evidence to the contrary. Declined to publicly condemn the shooting of 2 Indian-born engineers by a man who allegedly said, "Get out of my country," as he was fired, but he declares himself as the least racist person. Allowed his administration to ask the FBI to leak favorable information to violation of rules protecting the Justice Department's independence. Held a nuclear strategy session in the public dining room of his Florida resort. Signed an energy independence executive order that will not make America more energy independent, but will likely prevent America from honoring its international commitments to reduce carbon emissions. Failed to staff nearly 2,000 vacant executive branch positions. Meanwhile, millions of Americans are still out of work and looking for jobs. Demanded the passage of a health care bill that he himself admitted would hurt his own supporters, and stands as a bill that will devastate the lives of millions of people who need health care. Threatened to sabotage America's insurance markets as a means of coercing Democrats into voting for his plan to finance a large cut on the rich by throwing millions off of Medicaid. Allowed his budget director to argue that cutting funding to Meals on Wheels is probably one of the most compassionate things we can do. Meanwhile, there are people still homeless and hungry. Gave his daughter an office in the White House and a security clearance while keeping her immune from conflict of interest laws. Praised a cable news anchor who was fired for serial sexual harassment days after declaring April National Sexual Assault Awareness and Prevention Month, which gives rape culture a voice. Referred to several different North Korean leaders as "this gentleman." Knowingly hired a paid agent to the Turkish government as his national security advisor. Disputed the Office of Government Ethics legal authority to oversee government ethics, because why be ethical? Released a budget with a $2 trillion math error. Abandoned an alliance with a longtime Middle East ally over Twitter. Shared highly classified Israeli intelligence with a core ally of Israel's top geopolitical foe. Then accidentally publicly confirmed that he has done so. Encouraged America's intelligence chiefs to undermine the FBI's Russia probe, and fired the director of FBI for failing to demonstrate personal loyalty to him, and tried to intimidate his former FBI director into silence by threatening to release secret recordings of their conversations. This is the America that is supposed to be so much greater. Thanks for listening.